Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar, Movers, Joiners and Leavers. Thank you for joining us today. We are going to kick it off in a couple of minutes, but just while we wait for everyone to join us, we are going to start with a poll. So, which of the following challenges have you faced when managing personnel changes and external users in Microsoft? Feel free to select all of those that you have faced. So have you troubleshooted access issues for external users in Microsoft 365? Have you removed a user's access to Microsoft 365 after they have left? Have you dealt with user account lockout or password reset issues? Have you had issues syncing accounts and licenses from Microsoft 365 to Active Directory? And have you faced challenges transferring rights of shared files? I'm sure many of you have faced similar issues, as we all have. So please feel free to click any issues that you face. So we have a lot of people that have had some access issues with external users. We have a lot of people that have removed the user's access in Microsoft 365 when some employees have left. We've got a lot of people have faced some issues transferring rights of shared files. A lot of people have dealt with some account lockouts and password reset. I am one of those annoying people that that's often getting locked out. But the one that most people have faced is the top one. So a lot of people have troubleshooted access issues. Great, if we want to head to this slide. So yeah, as you know, you are this one. So here is some housekeeping rules for you all. So if you experience any technical issues, please use the chat feature to let us know and we can get those sorted for you. This is being recorded and you will be sent an email afterwards if you would like to go over the webinar. The link will be there. And at the end, there will be a live Q&A. So at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A button. So please feel free to pop all of your questions in there. Then at the end, we will be using some time to ask our hosts these questions and get them answered for you. If you want to hop to the next slide, perfect. So you are all here because Microsoft 365 is at the core of your business. So what can CoreView help you with? So commands Microsoft 365 operations from one single interface. CoreView can help you optimize tasks, workflows, real-time monitoring, as well as automated responses. We can help you to refine governance across the whole of Microsoft 365, and we can empower your stakeholders to access exactly what they need to do with their jobs without compromising any security. So I would like to introduce you to our host, Kasia.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the webinar today. My name is Kasia Nowicka. I'm Product Marketing Manager at CoreView. I've been with the company for the last 5 years, but working with Office 365 and 365 for a decade now. So yeah, previously Solutions Architect, Office 365 Trainer. Pleasure to meet you all. And with me, there is also Roy. Roy, I will let you introduce yourself.
Sure, yeah. So my name is Roy Martinez. I'm what we call a technology evangelist here at CoreView. Basically, I work alongside Kasia to make sure that our message and our value proposition is well understood by our customer base. But yeah, I have a tendency to be known as a kind of a 365 governance advocate and enthusiast. Over a decade working in the Microsoft collaboration space, if you can't tell from the gray beard. And I've worked with quite a few different vendors in the space. So yeah, I think my original focus was around collaboration content migration. So I have a real keen understanding, and I've kind of seen Microsoft 365 grow over the course of its lineage since the BPOS days. So yeah, happy to be here alongside Kasia, and I think it's a great topic.
Right, so today's agenda, of course, the topic is, we could talk hours about the topics, but we're going to focus on 3 particular processes: joining, leaving, and moving M365 organization. We're going to talk briefly about all 3 and let's say key consideration for each of those processes. But we're going to focus on also security and compliance, and down the road, we're going to also talk a bit more about the tools and the best practices, how you can actually maybe make those processes more effective, more secure, and kind of like our key recommendations if it comes to these processes. And then, of course, we're going to host a live Q&A, so we welcome all the questions. There is no bad questions. We're more than happy to answer any of them. So let's jump straight to it. Roy, I will give you the voice now.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly mention that throughout the course of the agenda, we're really going to highlight some key concepts. I mean, the implications around license management and how to make sure the licenses are handled effectively throughout these topics. Again, as Kasia mentioned, some of those security best practices and measures that are specifically relevant to external users and guest users, and then how we're doing ongoing assessment of those rights throughout. Again, these topics are kind of going to be couched within the agenda throughout, so just be aware that there may be some, may seem like repeats, but really it's just these main core concepts that apply to all, right? But yeah, without further ado, let's jump right into it, Kasia. So
sure.
Help us.
What are joiners? Yeah. What are joiners, movers, leavers? I think it's you know, it's pretty self-explanatory. Some call it also onboardings, offboardings, but it's all of these kind of processes that are related to user, and we're going to be talking in a context of a user in M365 ecosystem, whether they are joining the organization, leaving the organization, maybe moving departments, that kind of situation. So this is what we hear. It's being called movers, joiners, leavers, more most popularly. So we decided to go with that one. So why is it important, Roy?
How could it not be important? It's a real question, but yeah. So every decision we make throughout the course of these 3 concepts, you know, when we're onboarding a new user, when we're offboarding a user who's leaving the company, or when we're kind of moving maybe an interdepartmental change or a role change, the decisions we make through those processes affect us in tons of different ways. I mean, the most obvious is from a security angle, but this is where things like Microsoft 365 role-based access comes really into play. Being able to manage what roles your user bases have, what licenses they're associated to, how those licenses affect how they're able to do their jobs throughout those interdepartmental changes, throughout those moves, those joins, those leaves. So yeah, it's really hard to pin it down to one specific point, but pretty much this affects everything. Yeah.
Can I add something here? Because I was thinking about it, like what are the kind of, what is the bigger picture? Like what is it actually affecting? So if we're talking about the joining processes, of course, security is #1 for all of these processes, like that's no doubt. But also it influences employee experience. So you can start fostering a positive employee experience from the start, from actually onboarding process into your IT systems, including the M365. But also you should think about the maximizing your ROI again from the get-go, from that user joining organization, how you can get that ROI as soon as possible. But then if it comes to moving and leaving the organization, we are talking about affecting, I don't know, potential organizational reputational damage, or like legal breaches, things like that. But also there is going to be a bit when at the end of this webinar, we're going to talk about the communication. So I would say that departmental conflicts between IT and business are very often happening because of how these processes are not perfect. And so we want to also advise you how these can be done, so you are avoiding these conflicts, or at least minimizing these conflicts internally.
Absolutely.
Just wanted to add that.
No, I love it. And it's like with any topic like this, which is essentially, we're talking about governance at the end of the day, right? It's about doing things right the first time and maintaining a standard throughout the life cycle of, in this case, a user, but really any resources you're managing within 365. The other thing I wanted to add is, like, as we're talking through this webinar, for me, the easiest way to think through joining, moving, leaving is from the context of this notion. Like, for instance, CoreView just recently went through an acquisition. So we've seen firsthand exactly these concepts. We've joined quite a few new resources. We've had departmental shifts within and organizational changes. We've had people move on. So we've really seen this through the lens of this merger, acquisition, even divestiture perspective. So I think we're going to kind of lean into that context as we talk through some of this stuff, just to let you know. But this is a very exciting time for us, and I think pretty much any enterprise with experience has gone through this. So it's a good way for me to kind of, again, just to put the context out there, right? So let's jump into a quick poll before we get super started. So Emily, you want to take us through this poll real quick?
Sure. So how does your organization currently manage access rights for internal and guest users in your Microsoft 365 environment? Is it A, strictly managed by IT personnel? 2, division or department managers have some control? Or 3, we lack a formal process? I can see it's currently split, with A being the most popular and B following not too far behind.
That's good to hear that C is not a front runner here.
Exactly my thoughts.
So those are the results.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's interesting too, because, well, we can talk more about this later, but I wonder, I always am on the fence as to what is the better approach, to have everything centralized to IT or to have that kind of segmentation amongst departments to give them their own autonomy. But yeah, we'll revisit that topic a little bit later. Thanks so much, Emily. All right, so let's get cracking. Yeah, joining, moving, and leaving. So Kasha, I'll let you jump into joiners here.
Sure, we can already go to the next slide. So let's start with joining. We have a new person joining our organization. And of course, I already mentioned, we want to make the experience as seamless as possible, and not just for the employee themselves, but also for us, especially when I say us, I mean system admins, IT admins, but also hiring managers, HR, maybe even the colleagues from the department. So we ideally would like to have a very, very seamless experience here. But what is really important is that from the get-go, we should make sure that this person that is joining the organization has just enough rights. And what I mean by that is making sure that they have enough rights to do their job, but at the same time, you know, not giving them keys to the kingdom, so to say. So even if it's a new person joining the IT team, which also can happen, you know, start thinking from the beginning. I think it's the most crucial consideration. What are the minimum just enough rights that I need to give to that person to actually perform their job? I think this is the number one consideration here. Of course, minimizing the oversight. So what does it mean? What do I mean by that? We have noticed, especially working with really, really large enterprise customers, that the amount of security settings or like just pretty much everything related to M365, there are so many things that you have to select or choose, or, you know, it's very easy to have that oversight and drop the ball and forget, oh, I forgot to set ABC. So what can you do here? Of course, the best answer is automation, and we're going to be emphasizing automation throughout the whole webinar. And at the end of the webinar, we're actually we're going to deliver a very short demo how things can look like to minimize that oversight and to save you time, but also remove that human error component. Basically, that's what we are doing here.
Yeah. Sorry, I just want to quickly add. So on that topic of minimizing oversight, I think one of the things I always used to see at companies that I'd work with is this. And it's a standard thing, you see it all the time. But like when a new person comes on, there's an AD object that just gets copy pasted and recreated to create the new user. And with that comes all the rights and stuff that were associated. That's kind of like the easy button. But I think what Kasia is emphasizing here is that this is an opportunity in the very beginning to set a standard for how these resources should be managed throughout, right? It's very simple for a company to just copy paste and move things and reproduce, but garbage in, garbage out, right? So this is an opportunity for us to get ahead of that from the start. So go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, let's be honest, like business requirements are sometimes changing daily. It really depends on your organization. So sometimes using the templates is not necessarily ideal. And I think you were alluding to user templates here in M365. They are as well pretty clunky to use. So I don't know if our audience have used them before. They are pretty clunky. It's not very easy to kind of edit them, and you would need to recreate them from the beginning. It's not perfect. It's a good start. We're not saying it's not, but it's pretty clunky. If it comes to licensing, of course, you want to ensure that you have the enough licenses that you can allocate for that user and assign to a user, but that you also have correct license. So what I mean by that, there is a very fine print. If you look at the Microsoft terms of service and product subscription terms of service. So for example, if you want to go through the route, oh, I want to assign the cheapest license, the F license to somebody because, you know, they don't need all the enterprise package. You know, there is fine print that says, for example, this license can only be used for in regards to like mobile devices, like basically remote workforce and stuff like that. So be careful that not only your the licensing situation is not only responding to your needs, but it's actually compliant with the terms of service established by Microsoft. So that's kind of like a little note from my side here.
An excellent example of potential oversight. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And emphasis on the collaboration tools. So the first things that you want to immediately give access to or like enable people to do is to use their calendars, to make sure that there's enough permissions for anybody that should use that calendar, to use signatures properly, to use Teams, so stuff like that. So there is a lot of emphasis on the collaboration and communication tools, I would say. And what I've seen from the experience in my experience from the field is that a lot of the organizations are would like to see more innovation. So sometimes you are stuck still with some sort of like an outdated processes and systems. For example, HR is using like some outdated system where you basically end up with like an overnight, every night updated CSV file that is stored somewhere on an SFTP side. And only that you can kind of like realize, oh, there is like a new person or there is person leaving or something like that. So what we can do about it, again, we will show you at the end of this webinar, but there is a resolution to that kind of challenges. Roy, is there anything you want to add in regards to joining?
Well, I could reiterate some of your points, but really, again, just this notion that, I mean, the precedents we set at this stage are what kind of informs the life cycle of our resources throughout the enterprise. So I come from the migration space, so I always lean into this notion of plan, especially now with governance. This is no different, right? The more we plan for, the more we understand, and the more we are prepared, the better off the life cycle of our enterprise will be throughout. So yeah, I can't really add more than that. So let's talk movers. Yeah, cool. So with moving, similar kind of considerations, but I think it's different because now so for me, again, coming from my migration space, with any migration, any move should be treated like a mini migration, so to speak. And what do I mean by that? Well, any migration consists essentially of three basic parts, right? You've got this preparation phase, you've got the actual execution of that move, and then you've got some level of validation that occurs. And invariably, that initial preparation and understanding and kind of inventorying, that's the part that takes the most time and effort. So when it comes to moving, interdepartmental changes, user role changes, things like that, treat it like a migration. Understand what the implications are for that move, understand the different moving pieces, understand the things that could be oversight, and before you execute, right? So this is essentially a way to stay on top of, again, the same concepts could be true here. It's easy to kind of quote unquote copy paste or apply basic principles to a move, but the more you uncover, the more you look behind the curtain, the more you realize that there is potential for real impact.
Do you want me to talk about the other points? Maybe
Sure,
let's just,
yeah.
Sure. Let's just talk about the workflow and process integration and what I mean here by that. So you might have processes that are very uniquely specific to a department or office or location, you name it. So when we have a movers process, you should always remember to also integrate that new moving user to that existing process. That is often an oversight when you have especially some sort of like flows, automations, that kind of situation. So just wanted to call that one out. And be mindful of the org structure. So what we mean by here by that is you oftentimes need to update not only the user per se, but information such as, for example, manager or access to some sort of security groups or distribution lists, stuff like that. So just wanted to highlight that one if it comes to movers.
Yeah, the topic of moving is, again, it's easy to kind of gloss over it because it seems like a smaller level of effort. But again, depending on the nature of the move and the target, it could be just as critical as a new user joining. I mean, imagine someone going from, I don't know, like from the HR team to executive. Maybe they become a C-level, that transition isn't insignificant by any means. And the implications of the role change are huge. And also the opposite direction. Let's say they go from solutions architect to, let's say, marketing, so that change is substantial. And the accesses I might have had to particular content, for instance, just at the basic level content as a solutions architect may be very, very different to the accesses I need in marketing or am classified to C, and so on and so forth. Again, depending on the sensitivity of your data and the nature of your departmental differences, it could be more or less impactful. But again, don't overlook it, I guess, is the real overarching point. All right, so let's get to the one that everybody is probably most interested in, leavers and leaving and the process of leaving. Frankly, and I'll let you jump into these points, Kasia, but I just want to say out front, to me, the leaving concept and what we'll call offboarding basically is, in my estimation, even more important than the joining. So if the joining concept is about setting the standard for the life cycle, the leaving concept is about setting the standard for how you govern your enterprise, because this is where we can potentially have open holes and security implications. So go on, Kasia, sorry.
Yes, this is incredibly crucial because this can really potentially hurt the organization and expose it to, like I mentioned, legal issues, to organizational reputational damages and whatnot. So this is really crucial to do it as soon as possible. And I will tell you an anecdote. I went on Reddit to like a sysadmin thread, and I looked at some general discussions regarding offboarding, and somebody asked like, hey, what's the kind of like a process for the offboarding at your company? And the first most upvoted response was, it would be good to know about it from the HR in the first place. And it's it's funny, but it's also kind of terrifying. And yes, we've seen it a lot, that IT is incredibly busy. On average, I think I've read it in some Gartner statistics that on average there's over 100 different applications system that a system admin is dealing with. So M365 is just one piece of a puzzle, a very big, very difficult puzzle, so to say. And on average means that it can be much more for some organizations. So I would say the time to realization and time to action, time to make sure to immediately cut off access with many other steps that should happen, is the #1 priority. So again, we will show you a demo how this can look like, because there might be different ways to tackle it. It might be that you can empower staff from outside IT to do these things, or maybe you can bring enough automation that there is not actually a human involved in it. So there are different ways to tackle it. We are going to show you, but time to realization, time to action is incredibly important here. Now, of course, the second thing is we should not always take things for granted, and we should have a formal review kind of plan in place to make sure that 3 days later I'm checking, okay, this user still don't have access, or like I definitely remove that access or whatnot, and maybe then after a week and so on. So like an ongoing kind of compliance and monitoring here. That's what we mean. Reclamation of license. Again, for you to maximize your return of investment, your initial investment in Microsoft 365, the sooner you reharvest that license, the better for you, because you can very quickly give it to another department, another user and whatnot. You're not wasting time with the license that you already paid for. And it's quite tricky if it comes to Microsoft, especially if you're managing, I don't know, thousands of users, then it's really becoming difficult. Or maybe you have multiple tenants. That is also very, very tricky. Last but not least, we should also keep in mind the settings if it comes to archiving or record of data, e-discovery. So how can I preserve what this user has been doing so that I am covered just in case, and I still have access to that information in a year's time, for example. Right, yeah. I've been talking a lot, so that becomes boring. Roy, back to you.
Sure. I guess for this one, I would just add anecdotal evidence of these impacts. So in the migration space, we would always deal with like companies that divest, and it's a non-zero value how many times I've dealt with customers who, during the migration process, uncover that there are non-SSO dev systems that still have tokens that mobile apps are able to access long after the divestiture of a development team, for instance. So here we are sitting on proprietary information that is able to be accessed by people that are potentially working for competition, things of this nature. So I mean, you can't be overstated how important this stuff is. But let's talk security. Security is the piece that is the most important. So what happens if we don't do all this stuff right? What's the implication? We've talked about a couple of examples here, but all these things that we're referring to and all these topics really come down to security in the end. Everything leads to security in the end, right? So what methods do we have to ensure, for instance, smooth transition of licenses during an interdepartmental move? How do we ensure that good access rights happen during those moves or leaves? And what considerations we keep in mind when we're managing all that stuff? So, I mean, the answers are multifold. There's a billion things that we can do from both natively and otherwise. But the thing that I want to bring up is that's often overlooked, even still, sensitivity labels. I mean, labeling content and creating boundaries specifically around content allows you to do really interesting things, especially when you're talking about stuff like external users, guest users, temporary joiners, things of this nature. Because even though we're targeting joiners, movers, and leavers, there are temporary versions of all of those, right? I mean, we all work with additional companies and external enterprises that need to maybe potentially temporarily access our internal resources. Getting control of that is hugely important. But in terms of like some of the common security pitfalls, the things that lead to these implications, I think at least, and I'm sure Kasha, you'd agree, but the biggest one for me is, we mentioned earlier this notion of communication. I'll call it lack of training just to put a finer point on it, but education, right? Not having proper enablement of our enterprise in terms of understanding what these security pitfalls might be, not having good training around how we adopt these collaboration tools when we join, when we move, when we leave, things of this nature. Not understanding the purpose of particular tools. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no. This is what I'm always saying. It's governance never is alone. Governance always comes in pair with adoption, and adoption is more than just one training that we deliver to our users. It's the whole shenanigans of constant communication, constant explanation. How important things are. I don't want to necessarily call it by name, but recently, in the last few days, there has been like a massive security breach that lasted of over a month. It came out to the public, the news. Yeah, top execs of a very, very, very large organization, let's say, accounts were hacked. Why they were hacked? We oversight something very basic, I would say, basic, but incredibly crucial, which is a multi-factor authentication. And like, come on, so many people are talking about it all the time, but within our IT, let's say, space. But does the end user, does the business really understand how crucial it is? What are the potential implications of not having that set up? So here we're coming back to that communication, training, adoption as a part of the really effective governance strategy for your M365. Sorry, I'm a bit off topic. I'm very passionate about it, so let's move on.
No, I actually, I'm going to add to that actually. So it's funny because I noticed there's a discrepancy, it seems, generally between understanding the best practices and the things that you should do for proper governance and actually executing and implementing, or in maintaining implementation and minimizing oversight, as you put it. So I think that discrepancy is interesting, and it's almost ubiquitous. Pretty much any enterprise you go to, no matter how tight the drum is, there's some aspect that is just overlooked or just accidentally treated at a lesser priority. So yeah, I understand the passion. I'm there with you. And I think it's really important to reiterate, right? The reason these security pitfalls exist is because we start to get complacent about our governance strategy, and we start to take things for granted, so to speak. And in an ever-changing IT landscape, that's a dangerous proposition. So again, we are of a particular mind, but we tend to lean into this notion of, we need to be constantly vigilant and constantly updating and constantly reviewing our governance best practices to prevent these pitfalls from biting us. And I think this breach is a great example of that.
And to your point, Roy, one more sentence about constantly updating, just to build on that. Another common security pitfall is lack of innovation, or maybe just very, very outdated systems. I mean, I understand sometimes it's a lot of money to invest in new systems, but at the same time, using very outdated processes, like I gave you an example of, HR system that is like basically spitting out the CSV file every night, it really can harm you. So you need to calculate how much it's costing me to innovate versus how much I'm going to potentially pay in a hefty fines if something bad happens. And it's always better to proactively prevent than reactively pay the price.
Absolutely.
With that, let's move on, Roy.
Cool. Let's talk tools. Yeah, so certainly there are tons of native tools at our disposal. I mentioned sensitivity labels as a way to kind of control particular content and sharing of content between resources. Obviously, things like Microsoft Groups are a fantastic methodology for putting controls around role-based access and how we kind of iterate through that. But I want to show my thing, and I think Kasha's thing too, is automation. To me, automation is the silver bullet to governance. And there's plenty of ways to take advantage of automation. Microsoft itself has things like Power Automate and Flow that are really fantastic. We're going to show some examples of some automation that you can put into practice for this joining, moving, and leaving concept. We're going to use CoreView as our particular automation engine, just because that's what we have easily and readily available. But these concepts that we're going to show are theoretically ubiquitous, but we'd be remiss if not to highlight how cool CoreView is at doing this stuff, right? So that said,
just a few seconds from my side, Roy, if you don't mind, before you jump into the demo. Power Automate and all the kind of Power Platform, fantastic, undeniably. But if you go to a very complex process, you still need to have enough expertise to use it properly. So it's not really a no-code. It's a very low-code, but it's not no-code approach. So what we want to show you is basically a completely no-code approach to automating these processes for movers, joiners, leavers to the point that you could securely delegate them even outside of IT. That means that you can get back time on your hands to do more complex things if you have them to do, but also to minimize that human error. So this is really the point that we are trying to make here. Sorry.
Absolutely.
Go on.
Yeah. So we'll jump into workflow, but just real quick highlight. Here I am in the governance center, and look at this. I can see in a single second how many admins I have out there without MFA. All right, so workflows. Let's look at our workflow engine here. Just going to highlight a couple here. Again, around joining, around moving, around leaving. So let's talk about the joiners, and let's talk about what it takes to onboard a new, what we call a synchronized user, which is synchronized between Entra ID and on-premises Active Directory. So I'm going to take a look at this workflow just to give a sense, but here is an example of, and Kasha, I'm going to steal your analogy. If Power Automate is Legos, CoreView is kind of like Duplo. It's like a very chunky, easy to understand, simple workflow engine that makes it very easy to kind of put things that are very complicated together. So here we have an example where first thing out of the gate, we get some approval from someone on creating this new user. We do a check for duplicate UPNs. This is actually a PowerShell script that I've pulled into the tool to turn it into a button. And then we've got some filter logic. So I've got a couple of different subroutines here that run depending on particular filter logic. In this case, if a particular field is filled out in the AD or in some form, then I know to send an email to someone to stop the flow. And this is in the case that the UPN already exists. Don't create this new UPN. And then for the new user creation, I'm going to create a random password, create that new user in Entra ID. I can even put delays and things in place, assign the correct license. I could even tie filter logic to this to say if department equals XYZ, then license 123 should be used, or whatever the case. Enable a remote mailbox. I can add these things to security groups if needed, add them to distribution groups as needed. And again, all filtered and based on logic that is inherent to the process. Again, if particular fields are filled out for that new user, they might need to be added to different security groups and so on and so forth. Now, at the end of it all, I can send a lovely email out to whoever needs to know this new user was created. I could even, if I really wanted to, integrate this workflow with a third-party tool like, say, ServiceNow, and have all of that start and instantiate from HR. So Kasha mentioned earlier this notion of kind of, and we kind of heard a little bit of it in the poll results, of dispersing and delegating the administration of these concepts to different departmental resources. Well, what if HR, upon the decision being made to onboard a new user, could press a button, have all these things occur, which includes communication with key stakeholders around the new join, and then all is well in the world. The robots do the work for us, and all we need to do is validate after the fact and make sure that things worked as they should have.
And I've seen environments, Roy, as well, where our customers have, let's say, 100 different offices across the world, and 100 of these different locations have 100 different onboarding processes. And again, it's just one process out of gazillion other processes. So you could have 100 different workflows, but easily duplicate them, basically copy paste and adjust on that using that filter logic that Roy was showing, adjust just the pieces of the puzzle rather than create everything from the scratch or spend hours in your PowerShell scripts trying to kind of make appropriate changes. So it really, really simplifies the whole experience. And minimizes the human error. That's the key thing. So
that is the key thing. Exactly. Yeah. Cool. Let's take another look at a quick example here of a move. Now we've got here a departmental change. This is, to me, an interesting one. Again, this just highlights, as easy it is to gloss over the mover concept. Take a look at this, right? There's an approval process. Someone needs to approve that this departmental change is to occur. We build that into our process. We even determine where that change is going to. We can pull down group memberships from Active Directory to learn what they currently have access to, and so on and so forth. Make the changes, remove from particular groups, add to new groups, and so on. I mean, again, it's easy in language to speak that, but when you think about the technical pieces that are involved in a move, it's actually kind of one of the more complicated things, because not only do you need to, it's not only additive, it's also subtractive. Do you know what I mean? If you think of onboarding as an additive process and leaving as, or offboarding as a subtractive process, moving is both. It's kind of the more complicated of the two. And then when you talk about license management, that's a whole nother ballgame. So I could include all that license stuff here. I actually have a separate workflow that's specifically around license lifecycle and how we kind of reclaim and re-implement licenses. So here's another example. Here we're getting manager information. We're getting information about what licenses they have in place. Are we removing all the licenses? Are we changing? Are we swapping? The point here is, as complicated as this looks, this is a set and forget. So this is me defining my process in very mechanical terms and then applying that process to whatever actual real world example comes up, right? So this is a one-time thing, and now I can apply it across the board. Any additional comments on the mover concept, Kasia, before I move on to the offboarding?
No, let's move on.
Cool. All right, so offboarding, this is the one that matters, right? So I just wanted to me, this is the end all be all, right? So here's an example. Now this is actually a simple offboarding workflow, but look at all the things that I have to be mindful of and consider as I go through this, the various departments that are potentially involved if you do this kind of manually. I need to get info from Intra or Active Directory or whatever about that user. I need to understand their discipline name, who their manager is, what their OneDrive URL is, et cetera, et cetera. I need to get approval to offboard this user. That's an email that typically goes to someone to say yes or no. I need to block their sign-in status. I need to revoke every Microsoft 365 user session they've got. I need to convert their mailbox to shared. Now I'm engaging with Exchange. I need to add a manager to their mailbox permissions, potentially a different admin in Exchange, enable auto replies, forward the emails, add the manager to OneDrive. Now I'm leveraging the SharePoint admin team. What's not here, if they have devices in Intune or any other endpoints, I might need to kill those sessions, revoke those sign-ins, and so on and so forth. So you can see the offboarding is not a simple thing. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we could wipe managed device basically, like completely.
Yeah, exactly. Wipe that device, right? So as you can see, we're engaging with pretty much the full spectrum of the different administrative silos within the Microsoft 365 paradigm to engage Exchange on the email stuff, endpoint from the Intune team, SharePoint team for sites and OneDrives, AD team for user stuff. Instead of doing that, here I've got a single process mechanically built out that will do all those things in the correct sequential order, by the way, which is important, and then including the communication that needs to occur, including maybe a kickoff to another workflow that happens after the fact for validation later on in the time cycle. So again, the possibilities are limitless in terms of what you can achieve in terms of complexity in a very, very simple way. And again, this is set and forget. This is the process for onboarding, or I'm sorry, offboarding a user in my faux enterprise demo company.
And there's many, let's say, ways to kick off that kind of automation. So we could do it manually, one by one. We could have an external trigger triggering this workflow ticket, like for example, I mentioned from ServiceNow, or maybe some other source. But we could also delegate processes like that, maybe not as elaborate, but still we could securely delegate these to users who have this, let's say, a say, but are not admins in the environment. So let's look at the emergency termination, Roy, just for a second. Mm-hmm. I want to show you, this is just 4 steps. It's nothing really crazy, but just to help you realize how this can be done. Imagine that you have a person in HR that literally clicks a button, because for them, it wouldn't look like this. It wouldn't look even like a 4-step workflow. It would just be called emergency termination run. They press one button and they're immediately able to lock even AD users. So we're not even talking about the cloud only environments here, but synchronized or on-prem environments where a person with no admin rights can still do that. And I've had a question some time ago, like, is it reasonable to do that? Well, you can always have an extra step, for example, for extra approval coming from someone, from a hiring manager or some other person in HR. You can have like an extra, let's say, approval process. If you do not necessarily trust that, I don't want to give that particular workflow to that one person because that might be too much. You can have extra steps. That's just to illustrate that you can have these kind of processes off your hands and automate it.
Yeah. That's the beautiful thing, is that all these workflows are essentially objects that can be delegated. And to take it one step further, let's say that, I don't know, let's say we want to let the machines do everything. Perhaps it's just the fact that whenever it's time to offboard, a particular AD flag gets associated to a user. And let's say I have a system like this governance center that's looking for particular things. And when those events or when those criteria are satisfied, it will automatically create, kick off some remediation plan.
My favorite one is always disabled users with assigned license. It's such a simple, predefined policy tied to automation. But it's oftentimes the case that these licenses are really sitting because someone forgot to revoke them, reassign them, and whatnot. But also, it's sometimes really, really difficult, and it's a simple oversight in the case when you are managing thousands of users. So no shame there. But it's there. You can have that set and forget, like Roy said, and it's going to be constantly, every second and every day checking if there is a disabled user already in our environment, but still with assigned license. And we can say, as soon as that is true, let's revoke, reassign, reharvest that license immediately. So yeah, it's really taking already a lot of your time back to you.
Cool. All right, so that's enough of our spiel. You get the idea, though. Automation can't be more important. So the better you can take advantage of automation, the better your enterprise will be for governance. We hope that you choose CoreView for doing so, but there are tons of options out there. All right, so let's do another quick poll. Emily, if you can take us through this, and then we'll jump into some QA.
Sure. So how often does your organization review Microsoft 365 user access? Do you review it once a month, once a quarter? Is this an ongoing thing that you're checking? Is there not a formal process in place, or you're not really sure? I can see a lot of people, for them, it's an ongoing process. Then it's split between some people check once a month, other people are checking once a quarter. How often does your organization review these user accesses? Cool, well, here are the results. So 40% of people review these on an ongoing basis. 30%, there isn't really a formal process in place at the moment. Other people are reviewing this once a month, and some people are also checking this once a quarter.
This is interesting. First of all, I'm ecstatic to see that ongoing is the front runner there. But one thing that is a little bit alarming was the number of no formal process. And, I don't have to say it, but, certainly the more you put into that process, the better off you'll be in terms of governance. We couldn't evangelize that any harder. So hopefully that'll change. All right, so let's get to some QA. Are there any questions out there? I don't know if there's anyone popped anything into the Q&A section of the webinar yet. I may not be able to see those. Emily, do you see anything on your side? If not, I have some things that came in separately.
Yeah, sure. So there's a few here. So the first one is, could you explain the difference between guest access and external users in Microsoft 365?
Yeah, I think so. That's a pretty standard confusion topic, I think. It boils down like this, right? A guest user is an external user. That's really all you need to know. Guest access means you've got some, and Kasha, keep me honest on this, right? Because I may be off. A guest user is basically a user that has been given access to some resource. So when you go into, for instance, SharePoint, and you have a folder and you right click and manage access and you add so-and-so at google.com, that is now a guest user. That's a user who's accessing some resource. They're also an external user. So any user outside of your organization that's been given access to resources is an external user. A guest user is when they actually get a user object within Intra or Active Directory on the Microsoft 365 side. I think that's accurate. And that's the confusion point, is that they are kind of, in a sense, the same thing. A guest user is an external user, but an external user isn't necessarily a guest user, I guess is the point I'm trying to make. Kasha, anything you'd add there?
No, I would agree. It's like a specific subtype of external user is a guest user.
Yep. The whole point is just to give people from outside your org access to particular groups, teams, documents, etc.
Cool, we've got another one. How do you add a guest user to a Microsoft group? Once they're in the group, how do you determine their access levels?
Okay.
A
well,
lot
I
of
mean,
questions about guest users.
Yeah,
we must do another webinar on that topic.
Yeah, absolutely. The simple answer is it's the same. I mean, adding a guest user to a group is the same as adding any member to a group. It's just you're adding a particular UPN to a membership in the group. Really, the organization level settings are what dictate what a guest user will and won't be able to do. So even if you add, let's say, a guest to Group X, and Group X has 1, 2, 3 access, you can make tenant level decisions about what guests are actually able to do that could supersede role-based access within the group. I think I'm correct on that. Kasha, keep me honest if I'm not.
You're good.
Cool.
We might wait a few seconds for another questions. I'm just curious, audience, dear audience, would you be interested in getting some sort of like a offboarding, onboarding checklist or some sort of article about it? Would that be helpful? I'm just like, literally just came up with that. So if you have any feedback, could you let us know how we can help you, let's say, establish that formal process? Because again, I'm just like thinking about the results of the poll, how we can help you establish and execute a formal process for movers, joiners, leavers. If you let us know, we're more than happy to produce more assets or some sort of checklist or blog articles or whatnot. So please give us your feedback, and we would be more than happy to look into it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And even though, I mean, certainly in today's session, we used CoreView as our kind of method of delivering the automation story, but our insights are ubiquitous, right? Certainly we work for CoreView, but automation and onboarding, offboarding are pretty generic concepts. So just let us know. We're happy to give you any kind of advice or in Kasha's point, actual tangible assets.
Right.
Cool. Any other questions out there?
No.
Okay, cool. All right, well, I guess that sums us up then. Let me pop over to this. So there's a few things that we do have asset-wise that might be of interest to those who joined today. We've got this Gartner report around strengthening 365 governance with an effective IAM team. That's a pretty insightful and useful and interesting generic governance topic. If you want to see more from the CoreView platform, if anything that I showed today kind of piqued the interest in what other directions you can take that particular platform, there's a 90-second video you can kind of take a look at that gives you a very high level review of the core value propositions that CoreView offers in addition to automation. Kasha, anything you'd add here?
No, all good.
Cool. Well, with that, then I guess I will thank everyone for joining. We really appreciate the time, and
thank you so much.
Yeah, hope
see
to
you
see you
next
at the next
time,
one.
and let us know how we can help you, basically. So thank you so much, everyone.